In this Rewind episode, we're revisiting 3 essential dimensions that impact marketing strategy and success: accurately measuring ROI in our fragmented landscape, navigating media buying transparency, and exploring the role of AI in reshaping advertising and agencies as we've known them. Let's dive in. Welcome to Contrary to Popular Opinion, a podcast hosted by Vujade Digital. In each episode, we bring you provocative topics and novel perspectives around leadership, business, and marketing that defy the norms because exponential growth demands unconventional thinking and visionary action. So open your mind and let's get into this week's episode.
There are literally people whose job it is to sit there and oversee the hours and utilization and profitability and tell you you're out of hours, you can't work anymore. You can't hire anymore. This is your salary structure. You can't bring on that person. There are literally people whose whole job is to cap and limit what can actually be done on an account based on profitability components.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. You take the fee and divide it by the average hourly rate, the blended rate that most agencies work off of, and you come up with the number of hours that a team can work on work. And yeah, if you have a controller and a business model, profit and utilization model that works that way, that's what you govern your engine by, if you will. That's all you get as a client out of that engine. You don't get to get any more, which is why we're doing what we're doing the way we're doing it, because clients get out of us whatever they need and want, and we deliver whatever we need and want to make the objective as successful as possible, because we just think that's the right way to do things. But we do struggle to get compensated for that. I think it's getting tougher to get compensated for doing premium work with expensive talent, because there's a lot of pressure on CMOs to cut costs, to get more out of a dollar. I would argue, though, still, if you pay for that smarter talent, while it might cost a little bit more at a point in time, I think will get you more for that dollar over a longer period of time, and you'll net out on top versus taking the cheap route up front.
I've also heard you make a very important shift in the semantics that you and I have argued about here as well. You started out earlier in this saying fee, and you just switched over to compensation. And I think those are two very important different words and what they mean. And because to me, in the context of which we're talking about it, fee is what's put in a contract. It's kind of what is touted, what is sold on. That's the race to the bottom number that kind of sets your baseline that says, okay, is this enough? What do I hire against this with? Versus compensation is more of that value exchange. If I'm getting that value and if we're getting what we need and reaching those goals, I'm willing to compensate you the same way I would any employee. And it's silly semantics, but if you really structure what you mean by them, I think it makes a very distinct difference in the way that you approach that engagement, that relationship, and how one should be thinking about it, how you should know what you're getting. And as a way to think about it, one of the other things that kind of drives me crazy when we get some of our RFPs or some of the requests or some of the insight into the fees that we are going up against or that we believe has been quoted in business we're going after that we're not comparing apples to apples for, is when it's a number that is so low that when you actually do the math, and I don't think most people actually do the math to figure out what 8% of X amount of dollars is on an actual dollars, and then you break it down and you try and figure out, okay, is my couple $100,000 in fee going to pay for 6-figure salaries across 4 different departments, across all of the new business effort it took to win this, across all of the tools that have to be deployed to it, across all of the reporting? Like, if you actually did the math, it just wouldn't make any sense. And I see this joke. You'll see these funny posts that'll be like someone posting for a babysitter and they'll say, oh, I want to pay $50 for a whole weekend's worth of, and it's like, oh, if you break that down, it works out to 75 cents an hour. And that's insane. But this is the equivalency at a business level of what that would break down to. And then you take it even further with the logic test and you look at some of these agencies and you're like, okay, they're quoting 8, 9, 10, 12% fees, whatever it is against the scale of it. And then they're going and spending $500,000 to sponsor this event. And they're sending all these things over there and they've got X share price or any scale of it. And you're like, that money comes from somewhere. Like they're not a charity. Like clients are paying for that. But then you do the math and you're like, that sponsorship cost as much as one of the entire client's 8% fee would have equaled out to for a year. Like, of course they're making more money somewhere. It like the literally logic doesn't even make any sense if you really stop and actually put some logic towards it.
Well, yeah, when we've done the math, taking a revenue number divided by the amount of people that are going to work on something, divided by if we do use a blended average hourly rate, just to come up with, well, theoretically, how many hours a week should each person be working on this client's business? And if you take those low numbers, if you said to a client, hey, our team's only going to work on your business this many hours a week, at that number, I don't think anybody would agree to that in principle. I think they would say, well, that's not enough time to do the work. Well, yeah, it's not, but we can't do the work. We have been hired in the past, and I actually have a friend's agency that just got hired to do this. We have been hired in the past to audit, to really get into some deep forensic auditing of other media agencies' executions, where we've been able to get under the hood to some degree and analyze things. If you're a marketer and you're hiring an agency, can you sort of point out maybe some of the key tactical things or labels of types of things that you would say to a marketer, hey, like if you're going to hire a media agency, probably want to audit their work every so often. And these are the things you should be looking for. Can they even see the things that you would tell them? I don't even know. Like there's certain things that I think a marketer could never see, but there are certain things they could. So of the things that they could see, what would you recommend?
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. And I would say the one that is the most egregious example of an agency working not to get fired, which is what I see most often, is, and there's been iterations, this has evolved over time, is basically you'll go in and you'll see the campaign structure and you'll see the media strategy built around taking credit for as much as possible, paper numbers, things that look good, the lowest green arrows up, what is best to allow me to report and say, I'm doing a great job. I don't know about the business side of things, but my numbers are all up. This can be everything from overinvestment in branded search to cookie bombing to taking credit across multi-touch to looking at the way that they set up KPIs in their favor. So again, right out of the gate being set up to say, as long as I'm always showing progress for a positive story, no matter what, I will continue to collect my fee, versus being set up to say that didn't work. And what did we learn from it? And what can we get better? And how do we get incremental? And should we be spending more? Or is the next cheapest, highest volume thing the right next dollar to spend for the true goal of the business?
Yeah, but if you're the marketer, but hold on. If you're the marketer, I want to know, how does the marketer know the truth behind the dollar being spent? Maybe a better way to frame this up is if you were coaching a marketer to ask their agency questions to verify or validate, and I'm talking about like the actual media expense, if you will, if that's a fair thing to ask, which I think it is, what would you tell them to ask? What would you tell them to look for?
I mean, there's plenty of ways to add it in, and trying to truly forensically audit and go down. I don't think that's a worthwhile time. That's not the way that I would go about it. Again, I would do it more across what are the conversations that you're having? What are you hearing? Is all you're ever being told how great the media is doing? Or is anyone ever asking you, how is our media results translating to your business outcomes? Are you ever hearing a challenging, creative idea or effort? Is anyone ever talked to you about, hey, we want to try this. It's not going to be the best CPA, but we feel like it'll benefit your business because of this or this. Or we're worried that this isn't driving incremental value and we maybe want to increase this cost, but we think it'll bring in net new customers, whereas the other. Like, are you ever hearing anything that is thinking about the business reality? Or is it always, we're doing a great job, we're getting you big numbers, green arrows up, we're killing it? Is it always just this defensive, me, how great am I doing? Versus, let's talk about your business. Let's dive in. Let's ask the hard questions. Let me learn more. Let me think more. Again, I would want to hear someone that is challenging the efficacy of media investments to outcomes and asking me questions about my business. And is that lining up with what they're seeing? Does that make sense? Is there anything that's being missed? If it's all just about my media buying and we're great, that would be my biggest red flag in totality.
That's still not uncovering. And again, I'm sort of backing up to the ad tax thing. And this was a big topic back maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's probably less now, but still, when you think about agencies taking a piece of business for a very low fee, the marketer could still ask all those questions. Maybe the agency's got some pretty good answers for that. Still not telling the marketer, there's no evidence at that point in time that they can really look at and know for sure, unless the media costs are being paid by the client. If the client's credit card is on the Meta platform or the Google platform, so they know what the true net costs are, which we see and promote that to be a thing to do, a good best practice to do, because that way the advertiser does know what the true hard cost of the media is, but sometimes they don't want to do that, especially on the smaller side. They want the agency to float the media buy. On the programmatic side, it's very different. There's a lot of ways. We've talked to agencies that are programmatic services, managed services, white label services that sell media on a CPM, and there's no fee. Or compensation. They're just selling media on a CPM because they've got a markup on the CPM, and the client has no idea. I guess the question is there really any way anymore other than the client having the billing, the net media billing going directly to them? Is there any way to really have visibility or line of sight into the ad tax, the hidden ad tax?
There is, but if you're going to do that, you might as well just in-house it anyway instead of outsourcing. Again, I don't think that's the answer. I don't think going line item and going to that level of scrutiny is the most efficient way to go about it. I think it is more considering, are you getting what you want out of the relationship? And if the answer is no, that very much may be a strong reason why. And again, when I say what you're getting what you want is, do you like the team that's working on your business? Is it the same team? Do they think about your business? Again, it's a value exchange. You don't need to see every line item to someone building your house. If they built you a beautiful house at the quote you gave them, that's great. But if they give you kind of a crappy house, or if they're taking 3 times as long to build it, you're going to start to ask questions and start to understand, why is this, right? So again, is your business going the direction you want? Do you let I think it's very relationship based, and it's built into that. And I think it should be based on the people and the conversations and the way someone's showing up. And again, if you're not getting what you want, I think a lot of it is built around the compensation structure and the way that these agency relationships are built to be. And the last thing that really comes to mind on this is this whole idea of transparency has been this buzzword for a long time now.
Yep.
And the idea of transparency is kind of ridiculous to me because the transparency thing is about you're going to see visibility. Well, but the reality is no one's seeing that. No one's diving in. Like, you don't have a whole person who's forensically going through this and understanding and going through it. Like, the transparency should be inherent if the motivations are aligned and there's every reason to explain, here's this great thing I did for you and here's what I expect for it. And if and when it works, your business is going to go up. You're going to spend more money with me. And guess what? I'm going to earn more because of it. I have, again, shared upside in that, and you're going to get what you pay for on it. But again, if you're charging single digit percentages and no retainers and all these other things, and you just do the math and it's not on there, it becomes crazy to me to expect what you're going to get out of it. And then the other thing that comes to mind is percentages work on a scaled basis. If you're $100 million spending client, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8% is a great number. But that same apples to apples 5, 6, 7, 8% on 50 million, 10 million, 1 million, those are wildly different numbers. So just going off of the percentage itself versus the reality of the outcome of the percentage and what it unlocks, it's just wild to me. And this is where I always talk about priority of client. If you are someone's 30th client in line, and then you do your math, if you become a rounding error from these bigger relationships, like, why would you ever think you're getting the A, B, C talent of this agency? Like, you're going to be the training client. The difference between $550 and $500 million is incredibly different realities and outcomes and what you go with. So it's not the direct answer you want. It's not a checklist of look at these things, and if it's not going, it's in there. But again, this is the thing that I think people forget about when they say, I'll get a cheaper fee, I'll grind them down, I'll get a lower number. And honestly, buying into, okay, well, this agency told me 10% and this agency told me 20%, I'm going to go with 10% and expect somehow that agency is going to just be happy with either not being as profitable or applying just as good a resources as other thing that just wants to get paid what you want. It'd be like lining it up and saying, hey, I'm on a murder trial and I want, $1,000 lawyer or I want $100 lawyer. Like, you're probably not going to get the same outcome with those two resources being deployed. Even though they do the same thing, they probably talk about the great law firm they went to and their experience and how they have this great plan for you. But if my life's on the line, I'm probably going for the one that values themselves and has said, I'm going to do that for you. And that usually works out in your favor. It's a silly analogy, but I mean, it's the way that people forget to think about these things.
It's not, because I think most CMOs probably think their life is on the line. It's an interesting just way you describe it that I would think most CMOs would maybe think that way. But again, they're under pressure to cut costs and manage within a budget, and they've got their own marching orders that we're not sitting in their seats, so we don't always know what pressures they're under to make the decisions that they have to make, and the reasons why. We speculate based on what we've learned over many, many years doing this. All right, well, this is a hotly debated topic. I know you can get fired up on this one. I love this. There's probably agencies out there that would hate us for talking about this. Sorry, but it's the reality of the business. It's worth talking about. We should talk about it. Clients want to know about it. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to ask you the same question I always ask you. And I wonder if you're any more prepared today than you were the last time we talked. I know the last ad, so I'll start. It wasn't really an ad, but I saw a post on LinkedIn today that somebody shared. And I love the brand and I love this collaboration they did. So I don't know if you've heard of the brand Dr. Squatch.
Oh, yeah.
They make natural deodorants and things like that. And I'm actually trying their natural deodorant, although it's hot right now. So I don't know if it's working as good as it's supposed to, but I do love their product. It comes up as one of the best recommended products on an app called Yucca. I'm just name dropping here because these are things I love. Anyway, Dr. Squatch did a collaboration with SpongeBob for a soap. And I think it sold out. As soon as it went up for sale, it was like gone because there's SpongeBob fanatics out there. But anyway, that was the thing that I remember seeing the most today was the SpongeBob Dr. Squatch soap collaboration, which I thought was brilliant. So whatever agency is doing their work, well done. Let's talk about the pros and cons for agencies. And the org chart. What do you think, given that scenario, that maybe we could sort of futuristically imagine? Let's say some of this that we're already seeing that you just described in the platform and some of what I'm hallucinating about is possible does happen. Let's assume some of it happens. What do you think the org chart of a typical media agency like ours looks like in 5 years from now? Do you think it still consists of an account manager and a media strategist and media planners and buyers across the different ad platforms and an analytics team and a creative team and a content team? Like, do you think that org chart changes radically? And especially if you say the sheer functional buying, like, again, let's take the trade desk and some of their automation tools that they have in it. We don't have to do all the work that we do. We could just very simply check some boxes and press the go button and walk away and let it do its thing and move on to the next one. We don't have to apply the labor that we apply. We do it because we know it generally produces better outcomes. And I guess the argument is, do you think that org chart is still required in 4 or 5 years from now? And do you think that part of the process is so commoditized that a buyer isn't really any better than an AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think that takes me down the road of the argument that I have a lot when I talk about AI and hear things like, oh, it's going to eliminate this job or change the workforce and labor forces. I don't think it's going to eliminate things per se. I think it's going to make people sort of adapt and evolve and hopefully enable human intelligence to be applied in more valuable ways, getting rid of the minutia, getting rid of the grunt work, if you will, getting rid of the difficult parts that aren't as valuable. And I think what the labor force will have to adapt to is what can the human bring in that the AI can't necessarily account for? And how can we have more time and bandwidth to start applying more value? And that's what I think a good company and a good agency will have to evolve towards, will be what can our people bring and control, whether it's that prompt engineering, whether it's the ability to dive into data and be able to eliminate some of the hallucinations and some of the problems that happen in AI, to be able to create dynamic exposure within the AI where it can't figure those things out, or translate a brand's needs and nuance or cultural components in a machine-friendly way that empowers those things, right? AI is still going to continue to be as good as what's put into it. And that's still going to be driven by a team and an understanding and an outcome. And that's how I think you'll rise above. You mentioned it already. The barriers of entry to media buying on Facebook or Google or any of those things is pretty low. And so you still have a spectrum of, you could just go in and press the easy button and there's a wizard on there that'll let you run a Facebook ad pretty quickly. Now, is that going to go as well as our team going in and thinking about it and going through and all of that? No, you're going to have a spectrum of outcomes. Maybe that one's good enough. Maybe the other one's really good. All of those things in between. I don't think that spectrum is going to go away. That it may raise the playing field. It may make the lower end even better, but that just means that the higher end has to continue to get better and understand it. And so I don't know exactly how the job titles or the experience will change, but I don't see it fundamentally changing where the human element will always be responsible for the nuance and the human behavior side and the translation side and the inputs and making sure what that it's good in, good out instead of junk in, junk out is still going to be driven by the people that are responsible for this. Maybe there's some efficiencies that get created. Maybe you can handle and take on more at scale with similar labor forces. But I don't think you can totally automate this way. It's not like having an assembly worker that's truly replaced by a robotic arm and there's nowhere left for the assembly worker to go. I don't see it like that. I definitely see that you can level up and you can bring more value. And I think if you're doing things the right way, what this should allow you to do is redeploy the hours and the bandwidth and the human creativity and intelligence that gets wasted on the minutia in much better, more valuable ways that you can level up even further and continue to create that differentiation.
Well, should we bet on this?
I mean, I hope I win because it's the future of our company, amongst a lot of other things.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it scares me. I think maybe the unknown scares me. Maybe if you're right, it just redistributes the labor force and it retrains the labor force. Because like you said, it's not likely in an assembly line there's a robotic arm that's going to just actually take the place of a human arm reaching in and changing parts and pieces. But I'm more bullish now based on what I'm seeing and reading that I think it is going to have a much bigger impact than I've thought about in the past. So I'm worried about that. I don't know.
It's like asking the question, like, are you going to need a lawyer or can AI do it? Are you going to need yeah, there's things that AIs can do, but there's still a nuance to it. I mean, it's going to be disruptive. I don't know how far it'll go, but I think there's a lot of other industries that I would see being disrupted a lot faster. You named one of them. The creative industry is something that I would be a lot more hyper aware of. But again, I've talked to people in that field too, and they have a point of view of what machines truly will be able to do versus what humans can do on that side. So yeah, it'll be disruptive. I'm not naive enough to be like, oh no, it's not going to be a big deal. But I do think that completely taking over and being able to have an even playing field, again, in a worst case scenario where that happens, you simply cannot have a world where every single product and brand has the exact same access to the exact same data and ability to translate. Because human beings only have so much resource. And so the competition for who gets that resource has to continue to be influenced some way. And again, I go back to the fact that we are getting less access to people's privacy and personal data and the things that drive that. Again, you saw this with Facebook. They were very good at, for lack of a better term, manipulating people's purchase patterns and behaviors. There was a whole direct-to-consumer boom that exploded around this and brands that really benefited from it. And then it all went away overnight. And no one was prepared for that. And we've been dealing with the blowback of people's expectations being set against that for years now. And so it's cyclical.
I think some version of that's coming back, though. I think some version of that's going to come back around. I mean, look, the cookie depletion thing is part of it, right? Like that's supposed to go away. It still hasn't gone away. Google has still said, not yet. No, we're still going to leave those cookies there on Chrome, which is 70+% of the browser share out there. So I do think something like that is still going to come back around. And the comment that you make about the world can't exist where every brand can have the same level of sort of autonomy with doing that, I disagree with. I think if the technology gets there, the only thing, to your argument, to the pros of the human race, the only difference will be the human intuition and knowledge to prompt and program how the automation does what it does. That might be
what I'm saying is we can't reach a marketing ceiling where everyone is even. If everything gets raised to that level, the good brands and the brands that want to invest and break through will find humans that will find a way to rise above that new plane. And you will find some skill set that will somehow be able to let brand A be better than brand B. And that's where the agency comes back around. Someone will hire people to say, hey, I don't want to be marketing it the same way as brand B. I want a team that can figure out a creative way to be better for me. And that's what the agency has to adapt to and find ways to continue to be better than the next baseline thing, which is going to be what the AI can do on its own.
All right, so I have a different spin on this. We can go down a little bit into, and maybe this is for another discussion, but we can get into this a little bit. AI recommendation. It is now becoming, I read today that OpenAI is going to try and launch a AI powered browser to compete with Chrome and Google. Can you imagine that? I don't think anybody ever thought anybody could knock Google down, but there may be a contender coming to market. AI tools like Perplexity now have shopping recommendations and things like that built in. So thinking about a brand advertising and trying to detect human behavior and human nuance and all the things that make us consider and aware and buy and all these kinds of things. Now we're going to have a lot of our searching done either on purpose or by prompt telling us what to buy. No longer here's an ad, become aware of something, maybe think about it, it's cool, I want to buy it. It's going to be, I need new shoes for running, and I run 80% street, 20% trail. I have an extra wide foot and I weigh this much and I have an elongated gait when I run. What are the best shoes for me? All of a sudden now these AI shopping engines are recommending, well, here's the shoe you should buy. Like, what's driving that?
Well, I think there's a difference in that purchasing behavior, right? There's what you just described as a very specific point of need. I have a problem and there's the best product to solve that problem. Not every purchase is driven that way. What makes two brands of t-shirt any different? They both cover your body. They're both good. There's a human, what's cool, what's not cool, what's brand, what's not brand. What do I want? What do my friends think is good looking versus what's not good looking? And so there's still, again, a human element in what is that. So point of need, absolutely. If you need a very specific product to solve a problem, there's the ability to match a product that solves that problem very, very clearly without a lot of ambiguity. But a lot of purchasing is done with ambiguity and uncertainty and taste and opinion and timing and other things. And so, yeah, I think that it'll change discovery. It'll help drive some of those things. I mean, it's kind of what Google's always done, though. Google's very personalized. It looks at what you search and engage with, and it determines what to show you and share with you and personalizes your experience. So it's not a lot different from those things. I still think you will need marketing and advertising to get people to prompt the right searches where they get the results from AI that tells them what to buy. You still have to drive that activity. Again, otherwise you have brands that are just, you'll never have a brand that can break through and introduce themselves if they can't have a way to come to market and get momentum built up.
I think it's really important to understand about that marketing mix component of it, right? This isn't necessarily just media measurement. It is the factors that drive the impact of media investments and all marketing investments across the board. I think that's really important to talk through. And I'd like to hear where you've seen the biggest successes, especially, again, not necessarily with the Fortune 500 or the Fortune 1000s where they have all of that, but at that small level. What I found so valuable in the tool is being able to get the correlation between when we have certain things in market and being able to get confidence that there is a meaningful relationship between those investments and meaningful business outcomes, but also the forecasting and being able to highlight where you could go and where you could invest, where you're over or under invested. And then some of the things that you touched on, which is not everything, and Todd and I talk about this all the time, not everything is driven by the next Facebook impression or the next Google search. There are a lot of factors that go into whether or not media is successful. You mentioned a few. It can be economic conditions. It can be sales indexes. It can be competitive pressure. It can be shelving space. I remember when we used one of these and we had a brand that was very heavily driven in Costco, and where they were actually featured within the store made a big difference on their sales. And we had to factor that in when we were looking at investments and going up and down. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about, again, how you use this tool, not only to validate what is and isn't working, but to also forecast what you can and can't be doing, and also how you factor in the non-media variables amongst the actual media spends to kind of bring a whole story together.
Yeah. So we're really looking at overall, of course, how marketing's working, but really driving that long-term equity growth of a brand. So increasing that shareholder value. And when we're doing that, we're looking at profitability on an all years basis. So we're really measuring top of funnel effects. So looking at brands that maybe it's a brand that needs to hit a revenue number to get a next raise or something. In some of our future simulations, we can go in and actually simulate what do they need to spend in marketing to hit 15 million in revenue. And then it'll tell them week by week where they need to spend, when they need to spend. But then with their model, we're able to input those environmental factors that might affect them. So it could be the seasonality, it could be competitive data, anything that you just mentioned. So when we're diving in there, there's several different ways to look at it, but each model we do is really dependent on each independent brand and the different factors that they're looking at. When we're looking at future scenario planning, we can do a myriad of things. So if they already have a set budget, we can just optimize that budget for them and take it down to the weekly spend and recommendations and compare that side by side. We can also look at hitting a revenue target, like I mentioned. We can also look at just maximizing that profitability. So the point of diminishing return for a brand, finding out how much can they spend theoretically next year, but before that ROI on the dollar starts to decrease. So there's a lot of different ways to dive into that. And when we run these models, we're usually able to see different elements that drive our decisions. So let's say we're running a historic model of a brand and we see a really big revenue spike and we don't know what that means or what it's representing. We can go to the brand and ask them. And we actually had one client who went viral on TikTok, which was fantastic, but their sales just skyrocketed overnight, only for like a week though. And so we had to indicate to the model that, hey, this was a viral TikTok moment. It's not going to happen annually or monthly. It's a one-time thing. Hopefully not, but probably.
That just reminds me of the classic Shark Tank thing where they come in and they're like, we went viral, and then the sharks just hammer them of like, that's awesome, but that's not an investable thing that is predictable going forward. And it feels like that's a real life example of kind of how that comes into the mix.
Exactly. So we had to tell the model, that's fantastic, but don't take that into consideration when we're doing future planning for next year, but take in their distribution or something that's increasing year over year, take that into account. So it's client by client, definitely, when we're looking at these things.
Yeah, we had our own more practical and real life example of this. One of the biggest clients that we worked in was a healthcare system, an urgent care system, and we engaged them coming out of COVID. And the noise signal of what they were seeing that was COVID versus non-COVID and the predictability is so much of the work that we had to do to isolate those signals and know what was short-term and what was long-term and how to predict. And I think that really highlights my next biggest question for you, which is one of the things that I really liked around working with the platform was the ability to challenge some of the assumptions and to basically look at how can the dials be tweaked for the specificity of a client and a category. We obviously used it in a very what I would call a very non-traditional way, right? This wasn't retail CPG. This wasn't sales, right? This was patient counts and trying to tie it off into that, which required looking at what is the latency? What is the regression model? What is the value of a visit versus what would maybe be going to a grocery store and buying something, and trying to really have an understanding on how do we make sure that we stress test the predictions that we deploy, and also going back and saying, okay, the model said that this should have happened. Did it follow that? Were there variables that it didn't account for? Can we tweak? So the evolution and the growth and the ability to use this in the right way. And I think this is a conversation you and I have had a little bit, especially with some of the upcoming engagements that we're looking at, which is it's all good and well to have good data and a good outcome with the platform. But it really comes down to, are you set up to do anything about it and to pressure test it and to set hypotheses in motion, go back and see what the outcomes are and adjust moving forward? Is there an evolution to it? I mean, that's to me what gets so exciting about the platform is it gives this real point of visibility without the blinders that can be a single channel, right? It's not just CPA on search or ROAS on Meta, but it is those things in combination with what it's driving more universally that lets us say, okay, we could spend more here, or we need different messaging, or we've reached point of diminishing return. So really, that's what excites me is it just gives that insight and that confidence to tell that story. And honestly, where we've used the tool the most is trying to convey confidence to executive leaderships and CFOs and the people who maybe don't look at marketing as a line item and an expense versus a driver of the business, and our ability to connect. Yes, it is an expense, but it is an expense that results in the growth of your business and the opportunity. And it's that classic saying, you have to spend money to make money, but we have to convey that confidence of, okay, if I spend it, it's not just going off into the ether and not driving anything. And again, I think that holistic view is what makes everything work so well and why I think clients love this so much when they can afford to do it really.
Yeah. Yeah, the most interesting thing I think I've seen is some of the brands that went dark after COVID, even if it was just 3 months, what they needed to spend to not build up what they were making from revenue, but to build back their base sales. So just purely by existing. So, a brand can see maybe only 10% or maybe only 5% of their revenue is being driven from marketing. But if they turned off marketing completely, we can see that their sales year over year, is going down significantly. I think the average was that they had to spend 3 years more.
Nobody wants to accept that story. Nobody likes to accept, but is the marketing driving it? And certainly no one wanted to believe that the spike in the growth of COVID was ever going to go away and that there was any kind of anomaly to that. I think a lot of people got burned by that.
Yeah, definitely. We can see when people are spending marketing dollars correctly, we can see the base of the company, just the base sales that exist purely by having your doors open, increase year over year. And that's really the goal. That's that long-term equity build for that company that I know I mentioned, but that's what we're really trying to do.
Thanks for listening to Contrary to Popular Opinion, where we challenge you to think independently, push the limits, and take uncommon action so you can achieve game-changing results in your business and your life. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.